Professor Mark Regnerus is professor of sociology at the University of Texas at Austin and president of the Austin Institute for the Study of Family and Culture. He's the author of 4 books from Oxford University Press and more than 40 articles in peer-reviewed journals. His research and scholarly essays have appeared in media outlets such as Slate, First Things, and Public Discourse. He and his wife, Deanne, have 3 children.
It's good to be with you today. It's good to see Kevin again. Haven't seen him in a while. We enjoyed him at the Austin Institute for years, 5, 6, 7. Put us on good standing and then came to Houston. And it's just been great to see you again and how well things are going here at St. Thomas. Anyways, great to have you as an audience today. Talk about a book that came out in 2020. I've given a variety of talks about it. Not recently, though. So, one of the ladies I was sitting at with said she just finished reading the book. I thought, well, maybe you should get up and give this because I think it's more current in your mind than mine. But so I want to tell you a little bit about the background of this book and a handful of the punchlines, all in 18 minutes. So it was a data collection project, not survey data, which is what I usually do, but in-person interviews, qualitative data analysis. We did it in 7 different countries: Mexico, United States, Spain, Poland, Russia, Lebanon, Nigeria, back in 2017-ish, back when we could go to some of those places. And one of the biggest driving questions of it was to understand the marital impulse today, mostly with the focus of talking to people who weren't married, or if they were married, has been married within the last 3 or 4 years. And so, and a focus of people between roughly 22 to upper 30s. And so in that process, we asked them a variety of questions, but one of the things we asked them, which was almost universally answered in a particular direction, is, has anything about marriage changed today? Okay. Has anything about marriage changed today? And everybody, except for maybe 4, said, yeah, it has. It's different than it was in the past. And one of the things I think is worth reflecting on that is, I actually don't think a ton has changed about the internal workings of marriage. But when they get that question, I think they are understanding it about like the external circumstances by which a marriage comes to be, right? Here's a slide from one of the better historical demographers in the United States. Projections of the percent of women who will never have been married by age 40 to 44 by their different birth cohorts, starting all the way back in 1825 up to roughly the present. And when I asked that question to the young people around the globe, what they told me is about the processes of getting married, how difficult it is. How can you trust somebody? How can you find somebody? How do you know they won't leave you? All of these things, which are certainly perhaps a bit more urgent today than they've been in the past, but they weren't answering the question about the internal dynamics of marriage. But what they were looking at and fearing in their head is that it's going to become tougher. And they're absolutely right. Because when my mother got married, 1967, on this scale, roughly 12 to 12.5% of women aged 40 to 44 had never married. Well, she didn't become one of those. She was married at age 22. Okay? But now you look, since the cohort born in 1935 to 1939, just pre-war, that number of women who hasn't married and a concomitant same number of men have not married has increased precipitously, such that when he begins his projections, right, roughly in the cohort that starts around my age, 1970, because he wrote this about 10, 12 years ago, he suggests and asserts that the share of women who are not going to marry, who are 20 years old now, is roughly a third, right? And I'm beginning to think that's an underestimate. Only because the dynamics around the internal angst around marriage and relationships is high. I teach a class called Romantic Relationships and Family Formation, and taught it last spring. I'm teaching it now. And one of the things we do is we put out a question fairly early in the semester for them to write their answer to. And we did it last week, and it said, what concern or fear do you have about relationships and the future? Didn't know what they'd say. Didn't do that last year as a new experiment. Get the data back, and I read through them this weekend, and I was shocked. There's 80 kids in this class, but shocked about that sort of level of angst around this subject of relationships all across the board. Am I going to meet somebody? I don't think I'm getting it. I've never been on a date yet in their junior, senior in college, and I'm worried that this is not going to change. I'm worried about infertility. I'm worried that I will meet and marry the wrong person and that they will leave. I'm worried that I will meet and marry the wrong person and I will leave. I'd say out of 80 students, maybe 5 had fairly tame kinds of fears that I think I would have had if I had been writing this back when I was 20 in the early 90s. So there's something real here. The circumstances around marriage have changed. I'm not sure the internal dynamics necessarily have, though. So one of the reasons those circumstances have changed is because of the shift in how people understand marriage timing, not so much how to do marriage, but marriage timing. Sociologist Andy Cherlin, writing not recently about this, picked up on this, and when I read it, I thought, this is exactly what's going on. He talks about how there's a shift in the mentality between, do you think of marriage as a foundation to the adult life course, right? Something that is sort of enables you to accomplish certain key adult goals in your life, and you're going to do it together? Or do you think of marriage as sort of something that you have to work to become eligible for, you have to seek to achieve, and that it's going to take some time, but you have to work hard at becoming the kind of person somebody wants to marry, versus this foundational mentality, you marry and then you become something together in life. You afford a home, a car, etc., and you have children. Whereas now the mentality is, well, first I need a house or a condo, and I need a car, I need a job, I need to finish my education, which takes longer and longer for less and less benefit. And then maybe somebody will want to marry me. It's a profound change in how we understand the thing. And it's been subtle, and it hasn't really affected how marriages operate. It just affects how people think about when they're going to do this and what does it take to get there. And it adds a significant burden to the kind of the process of marriage. And, once you're in a marriage, it's not necessarily a piece of cake either. Lots of work to do. But now we've added a ton of work on the front end, right? Which I think is suboptimal certainly for young adults' psychological health, okay? And we all know that this is a profound challenge. And it wasn't just because of COVID. It was pre-COVID. We saw it. It got exacerbated during COVID, but anxiety is profound. So now this slide I talked, or this increase in the number of people who are delaying means it's not just about waiting, it's about fewer marriages ever happening because of this delay. Some of my critics would say, oh, Mark, they're just waiting until they're more stable, mature. No, the waiting means it ain't going to happen for an increasing number of people who want to marry. And that's sad. That's frustrating for me as somebody who wants to see people accomplish these things. So the capstone mentality becomes marriage as a status symbol, okay? And if you take a step back and think, okay, the social mediaization of life, you get it. It's like Now marriage is an Instagram thing, right? It becomes, this occurred pre-social media, but it's been exacerbated by this. It's a status of successful development rather than just the practical thing you do, right? There were a couple other sociologists who had written about growing up in sort of marital cultures or not. And when they wrote about it, I read it in a journal, and it's like, where did they collect this data? And it happened to be the same county in rural Iowa where I spent 11 years. That was sort of the pro-marriage county that they had in their data. I'm like, absolutely, right? Now I look back, I tell my students this, I look back when I was in college, I just, I married my first serious girlfriend. Some people say, you are crazy, man, for doing that, right? Well, it's worked out so far just fine. I recognize why not everybody should do that, but also I see myself as having been embedded in this foundational vision. It wasn't a choice. It was the air I breathed, okay? And people marry earlier, 22. There are more marriages happening in that. The emphasis is on, well, you should do these things together rather than do them apart and then seek to become attractive to each other. That was a foreign language to me. So one of the things that is stalking, as a result, stalking young adults is this notion of uncertainty, right? And the answers I got on those sheets, there's just a ton of concern about the future, right? And so I wrote a chapter in the book on endemic, it was called uncertainty. It was supposed to be called endemic uncertainty because it's so profound and so extensive. The thing is, I'll go back to this in a second, but in theory, committing should diminish uncertainty, right? If you're uncertain about this person, but you think they're fundamentally decent, etc., commit, and then you're in, right? It just doesn't seem to work that way today. Uncertainty thrives on kind of fear of economic expectations, material expectations. Everybody has high expectations. We did data collection in 7 countries. There is just, everybody wants the same thing, right? There was once upon a time where parts of the world didn't necessarily want the same thing as you because there was no hope of having it. And now everybody knows what you have, right? And everybody wants it, okay? Everybody has the same vision now. The capstone vision is operative in Lebanon, Nigeria, Russia, all those places, right? So this are a handful of quotes for like what they talk about. The people that we interviewed, they don't like it this way, but it's they don't see a way around it, right? It's a conviction, this uncertainty that marriage is something that you have to merit, right? Again, that's capstone mentality. It's not foundational mentality. Add to that experience of parental divorce, and that just adds layers of uncertainty. Plus, the parents themselves become skeptics of marriage, and they caution their children, be careful, become independent, because you never know what's going to happen. Like, it's hard, I'd say, if you're an adult child of parents getting divorced, like, I understand why they say it, because it didn't work for them and they want to caution you because they want you to avoid the same. But it is something that fosters in kids uncertainty, which means delay. Delay means often cohabitation, finding out if this is going to work, etc., thinking that you can discern whether this is the right person by just mimicking marriage. Okay? All right. Plus, I don't talk about it here much, but the structure of smartphone dating exacerbates all of this because you have tons of options. When I met my wife at age 18, I knew there was one other girl who kind of liked me, and that's it, right? I wouldn't trade that for nothing, because today is, it's humorous, but it's a wreck. Online dating. not because it can't work. It can work. Some of you have met this way, but you met in spite of the hurdles, the psychological hurdles that happen when you are sliding left, right through human beings, okay, that you don't know, that you haven't met, who you're trusting an algorithm instead of trusting your parents or trusting your friends. It heightens uncertainty. Now, what can we do about it? A handful of things. I only talk about perhaps two. Which two were they? Okay, good. I think we need to recover these sort of marriage-friendly subcultures, which involves in parts, number one, telling exemplary stories about marriage. So, and since I wrote the book, I have 3 children. My oldest got married. My second oldest is engaged. And I'm like, how did that happen? Because I didn't see it coming at all. It just happened. And one of the things I think, though, is that in our household, I write about this stuff, we talk about it at the dinner table. We were never trying to push our children into a foundational vision. We just talk about stuff. They see my wife and I argue, solve problems, etc. They got used to the warp and woof of married life. And when they came across somebody who kind of reminded them of somebody that looked like their father or looked like their mother, it just happened, right? But I'm pretty sure it just didn't happen, because there's lots of things along the way that if my wife and I had done things differently, those interactions may not have turned out the same way. It would have been hit and miss. So the subculture in your household. And I want to end on one thing that it was sort of a culturally unusual thing here in Houston. It's perhaps a bit mixed on this, is number 7, considering allowing your adult children to live at home before they get married, if only for the right reasons, not so that they can sit in your basement, play video games, and eat your food, although that can happen anyway. But when our oldest finished college, and a few of you know him, he was going to move back to Austin and he got a job. I thought, I don't want you living on your own. I want you living here. You're not done yet, right? You're not cooked. Right? There's more that has to happen. I didn't say it like that, but we encouraged him. I said, hey, you can save your money. I'm not even going to charge you rent, okay? If your conduct is good. He did it. He saved money. He was dating his eventual wife at the time. But I look back, that year that he spent at home, very formational. He was finally in the mood and period of life where he wanted to understand how his parents and the household worked. It wasn't that way at age 18. He was looking to get away. So I just think it's a prudent move. And I think we undersell it in our culture. Anyways, there's a lot more in the book, but my time is short. And so I'm going to stop there and deed it over to Mr. Wilcox, my dear friend since 1996. And frankly, arguably my most significant and first introduction to the Catholic Church. So